Hi there, and
Powered by
welcome to
Riverside FM.
Continuing Education, the podcast where we talk about homeschooling, learning, and all the beautifully imperfect moments in between. I'm so glad you're here today. Today, I want to talk about a story that's not about math curriculum or co op schedules, but about croissants. And this is the perfect time to chat about this as we're heading into a new school year. Croissants, those buttery, flaky, golden pastries you see behind the glass at a bakery. I don't know that I've ever met someone who doesn't love a good croissant. I enjoy baking, and I always wanted to try baking croissants. And to be honest, anything with yeast intimidates me a little bit, but croissants even more so because they look so complicated. They're layered and they're time consuming, something that only professionally trained pastry chefs or maybe very daring home bakers would attempt. But a couple weeks ago, something changed. I don't know what it was. Maybe I was just feeling really bold, or maybe I just really wanted a croissant, but I rolled up my sleeves and I went for it. I made croissants from scratch. From scratch, y'all, with the mixing and the rolling and the layering of the butter. And in the middle of rolling dough and folding butter, it just kind of hit me that this actually reminds me a lot of homeschooling. So today's episode is all about what croissants taught me about homeschooling. I'm going to share the story of making croissants, reflect on the lessons that it revealed, and offer you a little bit of encouragement, especially if you're in a season where homeschooling feels messy or uncertain or downright intimidating. So grab a drink or maybe even a croissant and let's get into it. So let's start at the beginning. For years, I avoided making croissants. I'd see those beautiful pictures on Instagram or Pinterest, golden, layered, steam rising as someone broke one open, and I'd think, wow, I could never do that. Why? Because everything about croissants seemed intimidating. The dough needed to be folded in a certain way. Did you know that you have to actually measure the dough? It's supposed to be certain lengths, and almost all the videos I've watched of people making croissants, they were measuring it with tape measures. The butter had to be just the right temperature. The recipe required resting and chilling and more folding. It looked like a recipe that had no patience for mistakes. And that might sound familiar because that's exactly how homeschooling can feel. It's exactly how I felt about homeschooling at first. I remember meeting homeschool moms who had it all together, or at least it seemed like they did. Their kids would recite Shakespeare. Maybe not Shakespeare, but you get the point. They had it together. Their kitchen tables were covered in perfect lap books, and their walls were adorned with day of the week decor. They had color coded lesson plans and beautiful bookshelves, and just a quiet confidence that seemed to say, I know what I'm doing. Meanwhile, I was sitting there thinking, I am not a teacher. I don't have a degree in early childhood education. I have no eye for beautiful or creative processes. I'm not the kind of mom to get out the craft supplies and, conjure up some beautiful lesson plan. What if I mess this up? What if I ruin them? And just like croissants, homeschooling felt like something I admired from afar, but didn't feel equipped to try, at least until I felt like I had to. It was really the best choice for my kids. But here's what I've learned. Both are intimidating because we put too much pressure on doing them perfectly before we even begin. So let's get back to those croissants. I finally decided to give it a try. I found a recipe that looked manageable. I gathered ingredients, the flour, yeast, sugar, salt, butter, so much butter. I cleared off the kitchen counter. I reread the instructions 3 times, and I watched the video that accompanied the instructions twice. And then I just started. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. The dough was much stickier than the video indicated it should be. I was annoyed at all the measuring that they tell you to do with a tape measure. Folding and rolling the dough took a lot more muscle than I anticipated, and I couldn't roll them all cute like they do in the bakeries. My kitchen kind of looked like a flour bomb had gone off, but when I finally pulled them out of the oven, I was so excited. They smelled really good. They looked crispy, they were layered, and they were pretty tasty. Even though there were several parts of the script or several parts of the recipe where I had gone off script, like I did an extra layer of butter and I stopped measuring with the same exactness that they tell you to do. Here's the truth. The hardest part wasn't the folding. It wasn't the timing. It wasn't even the technique. The hardest part was just deciding to try. Homeschooling is the same. You don't have to have it all figured out before you begin. You don't need the perfect curriculum or the perfect room setup or a year-long plan. You just need to start. You need to be willing to say, this might get messy. In fact, this will get messy. I might make some mistakes. I know I probably will make some mistakes, but I'm going to do it anyway. The other thing about croissants is that they take time, lots of it. You mix, chill, fold, chill again, proof, shape, rest. And finally, you get to bake it. It's a process that can take 2 or even 3 days. My effort was over the course of 2 days. You cannot rush croissants. If you skip steps, the layers won't form. If the butter's too soft, it'll melt into the dough. Homeschooling is just like that. It takes time, not just hours in a day, but months and years of slow layering. A math concept that doesn't click today might suddenly make sense next spring. A reluctant reader might one day get lost in books, but definitely not on your schedule. You might feel like nothing is happening, but below the surface, I promise you, growth is happening. One of my kiddos was learning math a few years ago. It just wasn't clicking. It was frustrating for us both. I threatened to return them to public school multiple times. I was worried he was getting behind and would never make it. And then I just kind of decided one day it didn't matter where he stood in comparison to other kids. What matters is that each week we're making some progress, that we were trying. And for 2 years, we covered the same math topics over and over again, using different curriculums, different videos, different techniques. I spent hours researching the best way to teach certain concepts. And one of the most important things I learned is that just because I couldn't see instant results, it did not mean that I was doing it wrong. I promise you are building something one layer at a time. And eventually, he got it, and we moved on. There was a moment during my croissant attempt when I was sure that I had messed something up. I had looked at the dough, it was wonky, it was uneven, and I thought, well, that's it, I messed up. These are going to be a disaster. But I kept going mostly out of stubbornness because when I start something, I really hate leaving it unfinished. I finished the folds, I tucked in the corners, I let the dough rest, I shaped the croissants, and I hoped for the best. And when they come out of the oven, I was shocked. They were imperfect, yes, but they were unmistakably croissants. Like someone would look at them and think, oh, wow, Heidi, you made croissants. They were flaky, they were buttery, and they were delicious. And I've had so many of those moments in homeschooling, days where everything feels off, lessons that fall flat, kids who cry, I cry, and I think this isn't working and I must be doing something wrong. But what I've come to believe is this: these moments don't mean that you're failing, they mean that you're in it, you're doing the work. And the process is messy because it's real. You're doing real work. Croissants look rough halfway through. So does homeschooling. But if you keep going, if you trust the process, you'll look back and you'll see something beautiful. Here's the sweetest part. When I told my family the croissants were finally done, they ate them and they said they were good, and not polite ate them and just had one. They ate multiples. The joy wasn't just in the final result, it was knowing that I had pushed past the fear and done something that I once believed that I couldn't, and that I learned a lot. Next time, I'll adjust how I shape them and where I place the pan in the oven. I found some more techniques for rolling them so I can refine my efforts over time. Homeschooling gives me these moments too, not every day, not even every week, but they come. A child suddenly reading on their own, or a conversation that blooms out of a history lesson, a science experiment that actually works, or even just a quiet moment where everyone is learning together and think, this is why we do it. My favorite moments are when my kids and I are learning history and we get to relate the work to present day efforts, or I get to make a connection for them that I didn't make until I was in my 30s. That joy isn't because everything went perfectly, it's because we kept going. So here's what I want to leave you with today. If you're standing on the edge of homeschooling, or if you're in the middle of it, wondering if you're cut out for this, remember the croissants. It's okay to feel intimidated. It's okay to worry you'll mess it up, but don't let that stop you. Start, mess up, keep going, give it time, trust the layers. Now that one of my kiddos is doing high school work, I see the efforts of our trials that paying off. I mean, efforts of work that we put in when he was in elementary school, when he was in first grade and we first started homeschooling. And while I look back at the prior years with a lot of happiness and satisfaction, there are lots of moments of sadness when I think how I reacted poorly to his frustration. Moments I regret, like ever threatening to send him back to public school. But just like with baking, homeschooling isn't about perfection. It's about love, it's about persistence, and it's about showing up and trying to do better. For me, it's about apologizing when I get it wrong and continuing our efforts together as a family. And believe me, the results, even if a little lopsided, will be worth it. Thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you feel encouraged, maybe even a little hungry. Grab yourself some croissants. And I hope that you feel a little more confident to keep layering all that goodness in your homeschooling journey. If you like this podcast, I'd love it if you'd left a review on the podcast app that you're on. Come visit us at our Substack. Our website is continuingeducationforhomeschool.substack.com, and you can subscribe there and be notified whenever a new episode hits or I post other information. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day.